Welcome to Speak Out. Today's episode is like making all of my childhood dreams come true. If you're a millennial like me or older, you've probably heard of the show Growing Pains. So I'm super excited for today's guest because they were an actor in the show, but more importantly, he's done so much incredible work lately. Has a new film coming out called Lifemark. It will be in theaters on September 9th. And if you have the ability to go see it, I highly suggest you do. I was able to pre-screen it. It was so good. I was crying the whole time. My husband was like, babe, you got to lock this up. This is getting intense. And then I look over and then he's crying. I'm like, come on, you can't tell me to lock it up and you're crying. It's just a phenomenal story about a woman who is faced with an unplanned pregnancy and goes to an abortion clinic and gets off the table and then ultimately places her baby for adoption. And it's so good. You have to check it out. And aside from that, Kirk Cameron has actually adopted 4 children himself, one of which I get the privilege of calling a friend, and his wife was adopted. So adoption is near and dear to his heart, and we dive into that. We're talking about the film. We're talking about adoption as a whole. We're talking about his history of growing pains and being a Christian in Hollywood and what's that like when Hollywood is, don't have many values over there. So we will get to the episode. I'm excited for you to check it out. Listen to the whole thing. Obviously, there's a surprise at the end, but definitely go check out Lifemark on September 9th and let me know what you think about it because I think you're going to love it. Kirk Cameron, thank you so much for joining us today. It is such a pleasure to have you.
Oh, wow. Great to be talking with you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I don't know if you know how I got connected with you or Nicole, but I am friends with your daughter, Anna. I've done some work with her with Save the Storks.
Save the Storks.
Yeah, I reached out to her. I was like, hey, I would love to have your dad on. And she connected us. And she is such a phenomenal human being. I just have to say you've done a wonderful job raising her.
Well, thank you. It's her mom. Thank goodness she takes after her mom. And Anna is an amazing human being. There's nothing that she can't do. And I love Save the Storks. So that's awesome. So glad you guys are friends.
They're a wonderful organization. I actually ran into her. I didn't know that she was coming to my church not too long ago. And she sat right behind me at my church too. So totally fun. I love her. She's fantastic. But I want to talk about the new film you have coming out on September 9th called Lifemark. I was fortunate enough to get a sneak peek of it and I watched it last week. And when I say I've probably still dehydrated from watching it, I really am. Like I was crying the whole time. The whole time. My husband was like, you got to lock it up. It was such a moving story. And I've had my own unplanned pregnancy. So I feel like I relived a lot of moments. But I want to hear from you. How did you initially hear about it? And then what made you decide that you wanted to turn it into a film? I don't know if nobody's seen it yet. Obviously it hasn't come out yet, but it's actually a true story. So how did you hear about that true story and then decide to turn it into a film?
So I've been busy making documentaries about the homeschool movement and all sorts of other things about our country. And one day somebody sent me a text that had a link to a short documentary film called I Lived on Parker Avenue. And this was a short 20-minute thing about a true story of an 18-year-old girl who changed her mind at the last minute on the abortion table. And she kept her child. She hid the pregnancy from her parents for 9 months and gave birth and placed her child for an adoption. And she thought that would be the last time she'd ever see her baby. 19 years later, he reaches out to her and wants to meet her. This is an amazing true story. And I watched that and said, this has got to be turned into a narrative film. And I want to play the adoptive father in the movie. I called my friends, the Kendrick brothers. Of course, they are the geniuses behind Facing the Giants and Fireproof, Courageous, War Room, and said, hey, do you guys think this would make a good movie? I just wanted to get their sign off before I went ahead. And they said, not only would it make a good movie, we want to make it with you. And so we joined forces. And for 2.5 years, this movie has been in the making. And the providential timing of all of this is unbelievable. Because who would have thought that in our lifetime, Roe versus Wade would be gone, and on the heels of that Supreme Court ruling, out comes a movie in the theaters that celebrates the value of life in the womb and the beauty of adoption. This is what Lifemark is all about. And as an adopted father myself, I'm sorry, I should say adoptive father myself. My wife Chelsea and I have 6 children. 4 of our kids are adopted, and my wife is an adopted child. This movie means a lot to me because it is pro abundant life, it is pro love, pro family, pro forgiveness, pro reconciliation, and new beginnings. It's powerful and entertaining, and I can't wait for people to see it.
I've always felt like there's something very special about movies that are based on true stories. Like, at the end, a lot of times it'll say based on a true story, and it just makes it feel that much more cool because it's
Yeah,
something that really happened. How closely did you get to work with the families that the story was based on?
very closely. As a matter of fact, we spent so much time with them, and I got to know the mannerisms of the character that I was playing, and so did other actors in the film. Alex Kendrick, by the way, is in the movie playing one of the characters as well as I am, and there's some secret actors who are in this movie. I don't know if you remember this, Christine, but there are some scenes that are very moving in the hospital where the nurse is basically taking the baby that was just born from the birth mother and putting him into the hands of me and my wife, the adoptive parents. Well, that nurse is the real Melissa that this
Oh,
whole movie
wow.
is about.
That's so cool.
And there's more characters like that. The young man, David Scotton, is actually in the movie playing one of the roles. I'll let you see if you can figure out who he is. And at the end of the film, there's actually some little clues to tell you about these Easter eggs in the movie. And it was great fun, and it was particularly rewarding to have the real life people watch the movie and say, "You did a great job portraying us. That's
Yeah.
our story. That's how it happened, and you know, you made us look good."
That's fun. I can imagine it felt like one big family, and I love all the main characters in the film. Like when I say I cried the whole time, I cried the whole stinking time. It was just
I know.
my husband was
I
so.
know.
My husband even cried
It's
too, but he looked at me and was like, "Are you okay? Like
yeah.
this
It's
is
I know
intense."
it's a little unexpected because, and that's what I love about working with the Kendricks is there's always humor in their movies. There's always
Yes.
some kind of action because, and in here, we've got skydiving, cliff
Right. Right.
jumping, ATV racing, knife throwing, high school wrestling, but then
Now,
there's
was that
always
real?
yeah, all of that was real.
That's fun. So, well, you bring up the humor
In
aspect,
the
and I was just going to say I love all the main characters, but Nate was like cracked me up. That was the only time I wasn't crying was when Nate was doing something and just was
talking.
over the top. But he's a hoot.
He's the comic relief, and he's actually the combination of 2 or 3 different characters in real life. We
Hmm.
couldn't fit everybody into the movie, so we took a few of them and we turned them into one. And that I think is why Nate is so larger than life.
Well, he stood out. He was so funny. But I know right now, obviously, you've been involved in Hollywood, and Hollywood pushes a pro-abortion agenda. What is it like, and how hard is it to find actors who are willing to jump in on a film that is a pro-life film? Do you have a hard time with that? Is there like a set of actors that you guys typically go to? Because Hollywood kind of shuns us as if anything pro-life isn't worth doing.
Yeah, but it's good for us. It pushes us to begin inventing our own and creating our own channels of production and distribution and everything else. Shame on us that we are at the mercies of those who don't love God and don't celebrate life. That happened
Yeah.
on our watch. So it's good for us. Um, that's my big picture answer. And then I would say there are people who are thrilled to be working on a movie with Alex and Stephen Kendrick. I'm one of those people thrilled to be working on this movie as
Yeah.
a not just as an actor but as an executive producer. And there are more and more people, particularly with Gen Z, the younger generation is overwhelmingly conservative and pro-life because they
You're
understand
right. They
that
are.
science makes it very difficult now to say that that's just a blob, that it's just a clump of cells. When Roe v. Wade was passed, remember that was 50 years ago. Now we have a window into the womb that demonstrates we are talking about a miracle in front of your eyes.
It's
And
phenomenal.
when I think of my 4 adopted children, that's exactly who they grow up to be. Little babies who turn into miraculous human beings, and my wife too. I would be so impoverished without them, and every life is valuable and should be celebrated and defended. That's why I think the movie Lifemark is going to resonate so strongly, not only with people who have been touched by the subject of adoption or abortion or unplanned pregnancies, but just the young generation in general, because they are champions for life.
Yeah, and speaking of your adopted kids, again, I just adore Anna. She's so professional and so mature for her age, and just a wonderful, wonderful human being. But I want to dive into a little bit more of your past. So you and your wife met on the set of Growing Pains, a show that I was a fan of, and that show really boosted you into stardom. And while you didn't always walk with God, I was doing some research on you. You found Him while you were still working on the series. What was it like holding true to your convictions and values in Hollywood, where there seem to be none?
Thanks for this question. I love talking about the faith story that's part of my life. And I didn't write this story. I wasn't looking for God. So I actually didn't find Him. My pastor reminded me he wasn't lost. He didn't need finding. I was, and He found me. When I was about 18 years old, I was on the set of Growing Pains as a professing atheist, and I met a young lady who I wanted to get to know. And so she invited me to meet her family, and I would meet them at church. Well, again, I had nothing to do with God or church, but I was an actor. I figured I could play the part of a Christian. And so I went to church, I faked it, and that led to me asking a lot of questions and some kind and intelligent people answering those difficult questions for me about God, the Bible, evolution, science, other religions, things like that. And that led to a series of decisions that resulted in me praying in my car that God would show me the truth and make me the kind of person that He wants me to be. I began to read the Bible. I began to become persuaded and convinced that Jesus is who He said He is, and that the Bible is, in fact, the book that God wrote. And I began to look at life through that lens and build upon that foundation. So that happened when I was about 18, 19 years old. And as a husband, as a father, as an actor, as a citizen, I think that faith in the gospel and in the Word of God has served me really well.
Yeah, your story is such a cool one to me, because when I was doing some research, and I think this is important for young people to listen to, and how standing up for your values and what you're convicted by and your faith is so important. Even when you were in Hollywood, you had even declined to do certain scenes that involved kissing someone else or laying in bed with someone else. You declined those scenes. Were there people who suggest you hide your newfound faith, or were there people who wanted you to go with the flow just for the sake of television, that discouraged you from holding true to those convictions?
It's ironic and funny, isn't it, the way the pendulum swings? You know, there were other things that were encouraged to stay inside the closet 20 years ago. And now what was inside the closet is outside the closet with no clothes on.
Paraded
right?
on the street.
And exactly, parading down the street. And then that which was good and beautiful and true is thrown into the closet, and they want to lock the door and throw away the key. Things swing back and forth all of the time. And so I would say that at the end of the day, you got to decide who you're living for. You got to know who you are and whose you are. If you're playing for the audience of popular opinion, you're going to be blown this way, blown that way. You're going to have no anchor, no tap root that actually gives you stability in the storm. But if you play your role as a husband, as a wife, as a mom, as a dad, as a whatever, for the audience of one person, and that is the one who made you and gives you instruction and direction through His Word, you not only have stability, you're able to see good from evil, right from wrong. You're able to pursue paths that lead to flourishing in your family and health in your marriage and freedom in your country. So for me, standing for what's right means being who you are, not only in the closet, but also in the public square.
I can imagine like people listening to the podcast now while they're driving, just be like, preach, Kirk Cameron. Um, when you and your wife got married, I want to go dive into adoption a little more because that's what Lifemark is ultimately about, and you feel so close to that subject because you have adopted. When you and your
Yeah.
wife got married, did you both know that you wanted to adopt, or was it something that one introduced to the other? How did that conversation come to fruition with both of you?
I'm telling you, Christine, it's like this is planned. In fact, I know that this was all planned because I'm not this smart. And God says that He works all things together for good for those who love Him, for those who are called according to His purpose.
Yeah.
And so I can look into the rearview mirror and see all kinds of things that I didn't plan, that I didn't figure this out. And like, I married the most amazing, beautiful woman in the world. I go from being an atheist in Hollywood to someone who loves God, and I want to do films that bring people closer to truth and heaven and this whole thing about adoption, my wife is an adopted child. We have 4 adopted children. That means, imagine the gratitude in my heart for those who have helped young ladies choose life. My children were 1 doctor appointment away. They were this close to not
Wow.
existing. My wife was very, very much almost not here. And if she hadn't been born, either would our 2 natural born children. And to see this movie that celebrates the value of life and the beauty of adoption, which we've experienced also, coming on the heels of the Supreme Court decision to throw Roe v. Wade out and make it a thing of the past is unbelievable. And I just can't wait for people to see it. Perfect timing, perfect message.
It is the perfect timing. Adoption is incredibly brave and it's incredibly beautiful and selfless for both parties involved, for the mother, for the families who are jumping in and adopting children. And sometimes people think there is a stigma around adoption. I feel like if I don't address this, then I wouldn't be doing this podcast full service. I remember very briefly during my unplanned pregnancy, I considered adoption. And though I didn't walk through with that, I was told that adoption was worse than abortion by several people. And we know that that's a lie.
Why?
We know that it's
Why?
not. Some people use words like giving up a baby, but actually it's a mother who loved her baby so much that she created a life plan for them. I want to know, in your words, in your
Beautiful.
opinion, why should adoption be embraced as the loving alternative to abortion?
Christine, you said it so well. You said this was you know brave and selfless. I mean, that's the definition of love, isn't it? I mean,
Absolutely.
when Jesus went to the cross, that's the greatest example we have in all of human history of love. It was brave and it was selfless. And we live in a culture today that is largely encouraging cowardice and 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 narcissism, right? We have a culture that tries to control us by making us afraid and scared at every turn, whether it's political fear or it's a virus fear or it's financial fear or whatever. And people are constantly told that this is all about you living your best life right now. When the truth is, if we want to live with love as our focus, it's just what you said. And I think that choosing to adopt a child is not abandoning a child. It's not giving your child away. It is creating a life plan for your child. It is placing your child into the hands of the mother and father that God has planned to raise your baby, who have been praying for a baby like yours because perhaps they can't have one. They can't have kids. And this is an answer to their prayers. And so if we're going to be brave and selfless, adoption is a blessing for a birth mother, for a birth father, if they cannot raise that child, if it's not the time and they don't have the ability. It's a blessing for that child and the life ahead of them, and for the adoptive parents who've been praying for an answer to their prayers like this.
Right.
So adoption is a beautiful thing. And I love how you can just change, I have to spell it out here, but 1 letter, 2 letters, and you can change the word abortion to the word adoption.
Absolutely.
And it's that's a beautiful word picture right there.
It is. Something that a lot of people don't know about with adoption is that for every baby placed for adoption, there are 36 hopeful couples. People don't realize that there are more
36
couples.
hopeful couples for
Yes,
every baby placed for adoption. That is
it's a
amazing.
huge
It's
number.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
There are
there's
couples out there
definitely hope.
waiting for babies. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I've always had it on my heart to adopt one day, and that day actually might be sooner rather than later. If you could give people like me advice or anybody interested in adopting as an adoptive father yourself, what would be the best piece of advice you'd give for someone going into adoption?
Well, I can encourage you by saying that my wife and I, when we started our family, we actually chose to start our family by adopting our first four children. And it wasn't because we couldn't have children, we weren't having trouble. We actually wanted to adopt our kids. And so to us, that was a blessing. That was an honor. And my wife has such a special bond and connection to our adopted children that is unique because of their shared adoption experience. I would also say that many people have this idea that adoption is way too expensive or it's way too difficult, it's way too complicated, when the truth is uh, adoption is doable. Adoption is it's not perfect. You know, it's not like you can sort of like post notes or DoorDash a baby to your house. You have to go through a lot of process to make sure that the baby is safe, that the home is safe, and all of that. But that's exactly what you would want. And we have resources that you will hear about when you watch the movie in the theaters. At the end of the movie, after the movie is over, we're going to come back up on the screen, me and the Kendrick brothers, along with a couple of other people from some nonprofit organizations who are going to share with you resources if you're interested in adopting.
Oh,
If you're
that's
interested
fantastic.
in crisis pregnancy care, Women's Resource Center services, and there's even Bible studies and all kinds of other resources and materials to help you with this subject of unplanned pregnancies and the beauty of adoption.
That's so cool. I don't know that in the pre-screen option that I watched, I don't know that that was in there.
No, it wasn't there.
So
This is
I
special
love
for the
that.
theaters.
That's amazing that you're going to be doing that. So, last question, but I do have a request after the last question. Last question. If you could say anything to those listening to encourage them to speak out on the issue of abortion, on the issue of life, and their beliefs and values in general, what would that one piece of advice be?
What's coming to my mind is the fact that everyone loves a great story. And there are certain characters in the story who are heroes. And you and I are in the middle of human history, which really is his story. It's God's story playing out over the course of, of, of ages and ages of time. And we are on the stage for a brief little moment. And right now, we have an opportunity with the overthrowing of Roe versus Wade, with the growing momentum of a young generation of students who value life, to actually be champions for the future generation. The last thing that the audience members want to see sitting in a theater watching a movie is for the person who can make a difference just be a coward and chicken out or out of fear close their mouth. You want them to speak up. They are the ones who can make a difference. What would happen if Frodo in Lord of the Rings just didn't step up when it was his time to confront the enemy? What would happen if we don't speak out for those who don't have a voice at the critical moment? It can be disastrous. And right now, we have a beautiful opportunity to make a huge difference in the future. And our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren will thank us for it.
You are right about that. I do have a request, and either you're going to tell me I'm crazy and shut me down, or you're going to be thrilled. But this morning, in preparation for the podcast, I was listening to the Growing Pains theme song. Would you
How
do me
did I
the
know it?
honor of singing it with me?
Oh my goodness, this is so fun. I can't believe that you asked me to do this. This is one of my favorite songs. I need to have this as a ringtone on my phone, don't I?
Will you sing it with me?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, Kevin, can you roll it? Smile. Kevin, you paused it. Start it over, Kevin. We got to start it over.
BJ Thomas, BJ, we gotta take it down to a different key, BJ. That's pretty high.
Oh, I sing terribly. I'm not a singer. This is just fun and silly.
I think we need to go to the top. That smile again. Come on, let's go, Christine. Don't waste a moment. Yes. I think we need to re-record this, Christine. Just you and me. Forget Jennifer Warnes and BJ Thomas. We got this.
It's terrible. My voice is so bad. I've even put it on my stories this morning. It was like,
well, this was the highlight of the interview. Thank you for just, creating this awkward, embarrassing moment for both of us.
Well, you know what? I'm a mother. If I don't embarrass somebody on my day-to-day basis, I'm not doing my job, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to message Anna right after this and let her know that I just did this with you, and probably you're like, okay, Anna, your crazy friend made me sing this song with her on the podcast. But it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Christine. All right, take care. God bless you.
You too. Bye-bye.